to New England Authors with Camille Nasser. I am Camille Nasser. We have a really good discussion today, I hope. And our guest here is Deborah Lynn. Deborah, welcome. So your mother had Alzheimer's, right? And this is the subject of your book, On Angel's Wings. Her sisters had Alzheimer's. How many sisters did you have? 3 sisters had Alzheimer's, and her mother has Alzheimer's. What's your prognosis?
My prognosis is, who knows? There's a lot in the book about the risks for getting this disease. We're at a higher risk, having had a close relative or multiple close relatives. There are genetics that they're discovering more and more today about how all that works. You can have certain genes, and you can have certain genes on certain chromosomes, and all sorts of things. The fact of the matter is, with older onset Alzheimer's, which is what Mom had, we really don't know exactly what triggers that.
Yeah.
A lot of people can have this gene and never develop Alzheimer's.
So it's a mixture of genetics. It's a mix. What is it?
I call it a cocktail. They don't really know. Early onset is, for the most part, a dominantly inherited gene. It's like still Alice, okay? The kids can be tested 50, you're either going to have it or you don't, right?
Yes.
With this older onset, it's an APOE gene, and it...
APO, what does that stand for?
I could not possibly tell you all of the medical stuff.
Right.
I'm not a medical expert, but it is a gene that has a proclivity, and it sits on different chromosomes. So it's kind of a mixture. If you know your genetics, it can be here and here and there. So evidently, if you get 2 genes on number 4, you got a higher probability.
Right, right.
But then a lot of lifestyle things go into it.
I had this genetic testing of my genome, and you had to sign a waiver. I was online, I guess. You had to say that you wanted to find out whether you had that gene that you're talking about for Alzheimer's, right? And I guess a lot of people don't want to know.
That's right. A lot of people, we're so scared. We just want to like...
It's a dreadful disease.
Well, it is. It's very dreadful. And people, on top of that, it's almost embarrassing, too.
Yes.
So it's kind of like, remember the scarlet letter, A? Well, we have a purple letter, A, for Alzheimer's. So people get Alzheimer's and they kind of close the doors and draw the curtains and go inside and retreat from life.
Yes, yes, yes. Now, your book, On Angel's Wings, it's a very personal account. You bare your soul, and it's very, and yours is very intimate with you and your mother. What prompted you to write this?
The writing actually was a cathartic, helpful exercise for me. The poetry itself. So the book is what we call
there's a lot of poetry in the book.
So it's prose and poetry, and I actually wrote the poetry just to help me. It expressed my soul and my needs. And then when I was going to put the poetry together and publish it, I realized I needed to tell the story of the poems. So, you know, it's all, poetry is intimate.
Yeah.
And a story like this is intimate. And I guess you simply have to be willing to share that.
There's very beautiful poetry, and part of it is your mother's poetry, and part of it's your own poetry.
Yes, I have mom's. Yep.
Yeah, so there's one thing that kind of interested me, is that you said that your mother had an operation, and the anesthesia kind of kick-started the Alzheimer's, or accelerated the Alzheimer's. I've heard that about anesthesia before. Can you explain that a little bit?
Sure.
What happened exactly?
And I just want you to understand that nothing is simple in this disease at all.
Yes.
So what I do explain in the book is that what a wonderful, compassionate doctor told us is that what it really does is unmask the disease. So what happens in Alzheimer's is it starts much earlier than most of us are going to become aware of symptoms and things. We'll start to notice unusual behaviors, and most of us are just like us in the book. We think it's, you know, mom being older, blah, 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 whatever. So what people with Alzheimer's do is they compensate for the
Yes,
loss.
yeah,
There's
yeah.
plasticity in the brain.
Right.
So if they can't do something the way they used to, they'll do it another way, and another way, and another way. So
Yeah.
there's all this little cover-up procedure going on.
Right.
The
And,
anesthesia
yeah.
interrupts their capability to compensate and cover up and hide because it disorients them so they can't find another
I see.
way around.
I
And
see.
all of a sudden,
There-
it looks like something happened, but it was really happening all along.
It kind of
Yeah.
brings to light all these things. Yeah.
We're very, very
Hmm.
good at using our brains and setting our intention and will to
Yeah.
make things work.
Now, another thing that comes through is this helplessness. You felt kind of helpless. You just saw your mother deteriorating, and how did that feel like?
That's what.
That's
what it feels like.
being helpless.
Yes, you are helpless. You're not in control. There's no way you can control this disease, and it doesn't even have a specific path. It's very, very different and unique for each person,
Right.
depending on many, many, many factors. So you can have a general idea of where you're going, but the specifics that happen day to day, you're just not going to know, and when they're going to happen.
Yeah.
So I used to explain things as being kind of plateaus. Mom
Right.
would be at a certain level, and then boom, she'd drop off in capacity and memory and ability, and then she'd travel along. You never know when those are going to happen. You're
Yeah.
very out of control.
Yeah, yeah. So we're talking with Deborah Lynn. Her book is is titled "On Angel's Wings: A Journey Through Alzheimer's with My Mother." How long was your mother diagnosed? How long before you had to take her to a nursing home? Right at the end.
Yes,
And
we did.
how many years was that?
Well, when I traced back to some of the early symptoms as I got to know what those were looking back,
Yeah.
she was beginning to have symptoms in 1997.
Right.
However, she wasn't diagnosed until her surgery in 2006 when it was absolutely unmistakable, and at that point she was interacting with the medical community and a diagnosis was possible. They never sought a diagnosis. You can get an earlier diagnosis than that if you pay attention to the signs and you go and get an assessment, which is one of the things I really promote in the book. Don't wait. There's a lot you can do earlier on.
Have you had an assessment?
I don't have symptoms yet.
Oh.
So you would be talking more about doing genetic testing, which I have decided not to do at
Yeah.
this age. I'm just going. I'll tell you my plan. My plan is to run right up to the edge of the cliff and jump off. I will go as long and as far as I can. Everybody in my family is very aware of symptoms, and should that happen, I told them they have everything they need to know right here in
Yeah.
this book.
Yeah.
Read the book, and you'll know how to take care of me.
Yes. Yes.
But Mom then persevered until 2010. She was in home care, and then in 2010, Tom had to put her in a nursing home.
Tom was
being her husband and the
husband.
primary caregiver. My
Right.
sister and I were the care daughters, and it frequently takes a team.
Right. Right. And one of the things that you said that is this caregiving can tear a family apart or bring it together. Right. What did it do in your case?
You know, I think we actually worked pretty well together, but I'm not going to say that it healed things because there are tremendous differences between my sister and I. I love her, but we're very, very different, and it was very difficult for us to work together, but we did.
Yeah.
And I'm very proud of that.
Yeah. So, and how does it tear a family apart? Is it just.
Yeah.
It just.
There are so many. I belong to some caregiver support groups and some online caregiver groups, and you can hear all the time. One of the biggest things that I hear is, especially children, expecting the family to help out or to understand, and they don't. Or the spouse looking for help from the kids, and the kids can't be bothered. I mean, people tend to run away from this disease and from the enormity of caring for it. Or they tend to minimize it and say, oh, you're crazy, you know, she's not that bad. Because when you talk to the person, they have times of real clarity and lucidness, and so they don't always appear that bad. And families get very divided over these issues.
They may fight about putting the person in a nursing home.
Why do you need to do that? What's the matter with you? Why are you putting mom there?
Is Alzheimer's an equal opportunity disease? Male, female, rich, poor, intelligent, not intelligent? What's the demographics here?
I'm not going to pretend to be an expert on those particular demographics. What I am going to tell you is that it does seem to, I haven't heard of any, and I've been involved with a lot of research and background on it, so I haven't heard of anything in particular that says, oh, it's, poor instead of rich. But they are finding some higher incidence. They're looking at incidence in cultural backgrounds, again, because culturally we approach disease differently.
Yeah.
And then they're also saying, in terms of prevention, that brain health issue, higher education seems to, help your brain stay healthier longer. But there's a number of very brilliant people who've been leveled by Alzheimer's. Yeah. So, it's equal opportunity. There tend to be more women than men.
There tend to be more women than men.
Yeah, women get really hit because about 60% of Alzheimer's patients are women, and about 60% of the caregivers are women.
I see.
So women end up doing a lot of caregiving.
Women end up doing the caregiving. Yeah. Listen, why don't you read a little bit for us? Give us a little taste of what it's like what your poetry is like. Can you read a passage for us? Read one of your poems.
Okay.
I really liked your poetry. I liked this book. I thought it was very thought-provoking. And one thing I want to say is that there's some resources here about that's very helpful if you're having to deal with a person with Alzheimer's. There's some really good resources here. Okay.
Yes, and that is one of the things that I wanted to...
Why don't you read one of the poems that we marked here?
Okay. I'm going to do this one here.
Yeah.
We'll do the sad one.
The sad. Okay. It's called sad.
It's called sad, and it's called sad because you're always sad.
Yeah.
When you're working with someone with this disease.
All right.
I'm used to being sad, even when I'm glad. I don't know if that's bad, but oh, it makes me sad to come to clearing space and know I have sadness like a cancer grown to live with when I live alone with my thoughts and feelings shown. My sorrow lingers like a mist, overcoming shapes and forms, settling in the hollows of my soul. Its soft coolness follows me where'er I go and spreads about me places others cannot enter in. A solemnity they do not care to see but falter when they have perceived. I wonder how long I'll be in this eternity of waiting for an ending not yet seen, holding her hand, rubbing her head, saying I love you to a fading mind, kissing time and space farewell but never letting go. She clings, a weak thing, tendrils of love reaching out to me when I sing to her, eyes that try to speak words I cannot always hear. I wonder how much longer we will be caught in this sad, soft place before eternity.
Very beautiful. Yeah, this is a really good poem. So again, I'll say the name of the book. It's on Angel's Wings. Deborah Lynn is my guest. This is New England Authors with Camille Nasser. To date, there's been a lot of research done on Alzheimer's, and really nothing is helping, right? Nothing, no drugs are there, no cure is on the horizon, although I think researchers really understand the disease a lot better than they understood it some time ago. Is there anything in the future that we can look for that might be helpful?
The things to look for in the future are to participate and to help out. They have a huge need for people to participate in clinical trials and studies. And you can access that through Trial Match, which is part of the Alzheimer's Association. So what we need are resources and people. The other thing that we're working for is money for research. Again, Alzheimer's is one of the deadliest. It's the sixth leading killer in the United States, and it is the least funded in terms of research.
You know why? I'll tell you why. Because like in cancer, like breast cancer or colon cancer, a lot of people survive, right? And they're very concerned. So you see people walking for cancer and raising money for cancer because they're surviving. In Alzheimer's, nobody survives.
But you know,
And
cancer, nobody survived in the beginning either.
Well, maybe.
In the
maybe
beginning,
so.
cancer was a word that no one wanted to hear.
Right.
Doctors didn't want to make a diagnosis. That's exactly where Alzheimer's is today. Because today it's basically a death sentence.
Right.
Okay, there's no way out but through. And you're going to...
And it's one of the, when you compare it to the funding of HIV/AIDS, and it's Alzheimer's, such a deadly disease, as you say, it's the 6th biggest killer, and not that well funded. And is there something strange about that? I mean, what can we do?
Look at the other part. The concept or the understanding of Alzheimer's out in the community is, who does it affect? Old people.
Yeah.
So those diseases that hit young people, man, we go right after them.
Yeah.
But a lot of Alzheimer's wasn't even recognized because we just thought it was old age.
Yeah.
It's not.
Yeah. The other thing that struck me is I've known people who've had Alzheimer's or taken care of people with Alzheimer's. And everybody is different. Some people get violent from time to time. Others just walk out in the middle of the street. Others become very passive and just stay in bed. It just affects everybody so differently, yeah?
We did talk about that, but you're also talking about different stages of the disease. So you may have known people in different stages.
Yeah.
So for instance, the agitation comes earlier in that mid-stage.
Oh,
Wandering is very frequently a
see.
part of mid-stage 2, that wandering. When you're talking about getting very passive and just staying in, now you're talking about the more advanced stages of the disease.
I see. So you describe a lot in your book about the brain, the hippocampus, you talked about that, and the frontal lobe. For us lay people, tell us a little bit.
I'm a lay person.
Tell us a bit about what happens to the brain. You know, first of all, these plaques come in, holes in the brain. They start expanding. Neurons die. How does it progress?
Well, you know, I'm not being an expert. What I can tell you is they're called plaques and tangles. They're protein. They're amyloid beta proteins. And they develop in the brain. And to be honest with you, there are many people walking around without Alzheimer's who have amyloid beta proteins. So that in itself is not the disease. At some point, something triggers it. We don't know what. It can be a whole combination of things. And then there are something called tau proteins. Those proteins are actually inside the brain cells. The amyloid betas are between the cells, and they tangle up and they interrupt those neurons that are jumping from synapse to synapse.
Right.
I believe, and my understanding is that the tau proteins destroy the cells from the inside. You would have to check with somebody who knows the pathology to be able to say that. What I really can tell you is that it does start in the hippocampus, which is an area of memory storage. And Dr. Rea, whose work I quote in chapter 14 when I'm talking about habilitation therapy and living at home and the changes that we need to make and how we interact with our loved one to create a good environment for them so that the disease progresses more smoothly for them. This broken hippocampus is equivalent to a file system. I love the way he describes this. So normally you get a memory like, today we're doing this, I'm going to remember this conversation. So it goes in my little file folder marked, you know, conversations with Camille, and it goes in my file drawer. And then at some point I'll pull it out and I say, oh, remember when and whatever. Okay. The person with Alzheimer's has no file drawer and no filing system. It's broken. There's no place to put it, so there's no retrieval. That's the difference between just a memory problem. So sometimes you're like, okay, I know that, and it can sometimes, as we get older, take 2 or 3 days for something to come surfacing. That's not Alzheimer's. Alzheimer's is an interruption of normal patterns that you know, and an inability to have any idea of what just happened.
Yeah, when you see somebody with Alzheimer's, and we were talking about this before, not all dementia is Alzheimer's. Alzheimer's is a particular kind of dementia. When you see someone with either dementia, they're not the same person they were. There's something that changed. When you see someone in a wheelchair, they're the same person, but with inability to move.
Right.
But when you see someone without, the person has changed. What we associate with the person.
Well, I'm glad you went there with that, because what we associate with the person has changed. And why does that change? Because we have 5 different senses that we interact with each other on, you know, sight and sound and taste and smell and all that kind of stuff. All of those are impacted when Alzheimer's starts working in the brain, because that's where we process all this stuff. But then we're talking about the person deep inside there. You know, there's no evidence that that person's gone. There's evidence that that person cannot express themselves.
This comes through you in your book, actually.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. You say the last thing that the person retains their spirituality, their spiritual self, their sense of touch. You touch that person, they feel it. The soul hasn't changed. How do you describe it? You're a Reiki master, by the way, and so maybe you can describe it better than I can.
I don't know if I can describe it, but I can say that I learned the Reiki as a way to stay connected with Mom, as all of our normal methods and channels of connection faded. So in other words, we couldn't converse or share things. There wasn't the understanding. She couldn't even hear me properly. So how do you convey love and connection to someone? You know, you can do it with your eyes. There's a lot of unspoken communication. And that, I think, continues to a certain extent, because again, their ability to process what they're seeing is being interrupted by the disease.
Yeah.
So it became a question of spirit to spirit.
Right.
And that was where I went with it. And the Reiki enabled me to bring her a lovely gift of some very relaxing, refreshing energy. It helped me to cope with my anguish and grief over the loss of the disease. But spiritually, I think that you could see Mom's personality. It would still pop out at little moments. It's there. Otherwise, when this disease takes place, you would never get those moments. But you still do, right up to the end of recognition, connection, response. So what does that mean? That means that whole person's in there. They just can't get out.
Right. Interesting, yeah. Well, very interesting talk. So let's talk about diet and exercise and all, and
all the stuff we should be doing.
Right.
Okay.
So what should we be doing? Again,
I'm not an expert. I would really direct people. I know a lifestyle study going on at UCLA out in California. Was just a series that I didn't watch the whole thing of, called Awakening from Alzheimer's, again dealing with lifestyles. They've had, I believe, some good responses in terms of lifestyle changes, which is literally a healthy diet, and some very, very specific and stringent routines. Like I know one lady has the omega-3s need to come from flaxseed that is freshly ground, because the oil starts to, disintegrate. So very, very stringent things. But again, it's got to
vitamin B too, I've heard.
Vitamin B is very important. I believe that constantly. I had Mom on vitamin B as soon as I could, big doses. Yeah. Anything.
So I have a friend actually who works in the Alzheimer's Association in Chicago. And she said, she's not a researcher, but she told me that the same thing holds true for Alzheimer's as for your heart and your whole health, is just being healthy, exercising. Yeah. I do Sudoku.
I don't know if eventually went to Sudoku.
I don't think I do it for Alzheimer's. I just do it because because I'm addicted to it or something. Maybe it'll bring on Alzheimer's. I don't know.
Well, the best cure is prevention.
Yes.
Right?
Right.
So all of these things help strengthen your system and help you be healthy all over. And what's healthy for your body is healthy for your brain.
Yeah, so yeah, exactly, because many people think, oh, the brain, that's for thinking, that's for being a university professor. But most of the brain's job is to control the body from the heartbeat to the breathing, to the moving our muscles, to feeling the hot and the cold. It's always controlling. It's always looking out for the body.
It's working all the time. It's our processor. It's our central processor.
Well, it's been just a fascinating journey to be with you. Deborah Lynn, I know you like to be called Deborah, On Angel's Wings is her book, and it's a wonderful personal story about dealing with Alzheimer's with her mother. Thank you. This is New England Authors with Camille Nasher.